Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Roxanne smiled back at Estella before looking up to meet Lucian's gaze. He wore a black, custom-made suit and his hair was styled with hair gel, revealing his handsome features. When their eyes met, Lucian's hostility seemed to have lessened. "A good morning." Pursing her lips, Roxanne nodded in response. "A good morning. Why are you?" Estella answered excitedly before Roxanne could finish her question. "I'm here with Daddy to pick all of you up." As she spoke, she peered into the house curiously. "Where are Archie and Benny? Are they still in bed?" Roxanne lowered her eyes and patted the girl's head. She then looked up and gazed at the man in front of her before turning sideways hesitantly to let the pair in. "They're already up and are getting ready upstairs. They should be coming down soon. Come on in, Essie. You can wait inside." Estella nodded and pulled Lucian into the mansion. As they walked past Roxanne, Lucian cast her a mysterious glance. Noting that, Roxanne frowned and narrowed her eyes without saying a word. "I said I'd bring the children there by myself. He even agreed to it. And now he's showing up at my door to pick us up? I can't even refuse because he brought Estella along with him." 2 days ago she was feeling hesitant when Lucian was willing to compromise for her. But thinking back, she only regretted feeling that way. He's clearly still as domineering as always. After ushering them to take a seat in the living room, she poured them each a glass of water out of politeness before returning to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the boys. Not long after, Archie and Benny could be heard descending the stairs. They greeted Lucian politely and ran off to play with Estella. When Roxanne heard the children's excited voices, she tried her best to forget about the other adult in the living room. Gradually, she felt more relaxed. Soon, Roxanne had finished preparing breakfast. Just as she was about to bring the food out for the boys, a large hand reached out from behind her and took the 2 plates away. Roxanne froze. She was so focused on forgetting Lucian's existence that she did not expect him to watch her every move. In fact, he even came over to help her as soon as she finished cooking. The moment she realized all that, she could not fool herself anymore, and all sorts of emotions started surging in her heart. Seeing the food being placed on the dining table, the boys hurried over and took their seats without waiting for Roxanne to call out to them. Estella, too, did not wait for Roxanne's invitation. She simply made her way to the dining room as though she were in her own home, taking a seat beside the latter. Roxanne looked confused when she saw Estella sitting down beside her. "Have you not had your breakfast, Essie?" Estella nodded innocently. "Daddy says we're going out to have breakfast together." Roxanne was taken aback by her words. It was too late for Lucian to stop Estella from speaking by the time he realized she was going to sell him out. In the end, he could only frown and avoid Roxanne's gaze, pretending as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, realization finally dawned on Roxanne. "So Lucian has planned out the schedule for today without informing me about it. No wonder he broke his promise and brought Estella here to pick us up. But it looks like I've accidentally ruined his plan." For a moment, Roxanne did not know what to say to lighten the awkward atmosphere. Oblivious to the awkwardness between the adults, Estella took a bite of Roxanne's cooking and said happily, "Ms. Jarvis' cooking is the best." Estella's voice brought Roxanne back to reality. Roxanne felt strangely guilty as she glanced at Lucian, who was still standing at the corner. She hesitated for a while before saying softly, "Come and join us, Mr. Farwell. You haven't had your breakfast too, right?" Lucian frowned, but he still took a seat beside the children. The truth was he had planned out the schedule for the day. He did not expect Roxanne to go straight into the kitchen before he could inform her about it. The atmosphere at the breakfast table was the same as usual. Roxanne and the children enjoyed themselves happily while Lucian sat quietly in his seat, looking extremely out of place. When they finished their breakfast, it was still too early to go to the concert. Hence, Roxanne played with the children at home the entire morning. Soon, noon arrived. Lucian suggested taking them out for lunch, to which Roxanne agreed, despite recalling the misunderstanding from that morning. As they exited the house, Roxanne thought of driving herself, including the boys, to the lunch location. However, the moment she met Estella's gaze, her heart softened, and she instructed the boys to enter Lucian's car. She took the passenger seat while the children happily sat in the back as they discussed the concert that was happening that night with great excitement. As she listened to their discussion, she felt much more relaxed and a smile appeared on her face. Lucian's gaze softened as well when he saw the smiles on Roxanne's and the children's faces. The restaurant Lucian had made a reservation in was located on the busiest road in the city center, which was quite far from Roxanne's house. It took them some time to arrive near the mall and park the car. By the time they arrived at the restaurant's entrance, it was already the peak hour for lunch. Thankfully, Lucian had made a reservation beforehand, so they did not have to waste time queuing up. The waiter led all 5 of them to a table by the window. In the meantime, someone was watching them with eyes wide open in the corner of the restaurant. "Frida? What's wrong? What are you looking at?" Asso Levandi asked the person in front of him, perplexed. The restaurant was well known among the rich in Horrington, but not everyone was able to get in. In fact, other people, apart from the few prestigious families, did not even have the right to make a reservation there. Though Asso's family was wealthy, they were merely a family that had recently made a fortune. They were nowhere near the rich's social circle. That day, Frida suddenly requested to have a meal at that restaurant. In order to not disappoint her, Asso had queued up early in the morning to get a table. Just as the meal was going well, Frida suddenly seemed distracted and began staring at the table beside the window. Asso could not understand what was going on. Regardless, Frida did not seem to hear him. She kept her eyes fixed on the group of 5 who were sitting by the window. This batch. Didn't Sonia and Aubrey teach Roxanne a lesson already? How dare she share a table with Lucian and Essie? And why do they look so intimate? Sensing Frida's displeasure, Asso followed her gaze in puzzlement, only to find the quintet, which left him even more confused. His family had just become wealthy, so he barely knew much about the rich. As the family's second heir, who was new to all that, he had no clue who Lucian was. When he gazed at the quintet, he only thought of them as an attractive and harmonious family. He did not know why Frida was glaring at them so fiercely. "Frida, do you know them?" Asso couldn't help but ask. Frida slowly returned to her senses and glanced at him with furrowed eyebrows. The disdain in her eyes swiftly faded. "There's bad blood between me and that woman." "What did she do to you?" Asso asked, confused. Frida pursed her lips and put on an angry look. "She stole my friend's man. I can't stand that." Asso was momentarily stunned when he saw his goddess getting angry. He then stood up and assumed a posture as though he was going to help her get revenge. "I'll teach that woman a lesson." Frida couldn't help but roll her eyes. Quickly schooling her emotions, she gently kicked his leg under the table. "Sit down. Don't act so rashly. It'll be embarrassing if you make a scene." Because she kicked him very lightly, he thought she was flirting with him. He sat back down obediently and asked, "What do you plan to do then?" "I'll do whatever you ask." Frida smiled. "Let's follow them and see what they're up to." Asso agreed without hesitation. Roxanne and the others knew nothing about the duo's existence. After lunch, there was still some time before the concert started. Roxanne had wanted to bring the children to have fun somewhere. To her surprise, Lucian suggested taking them to the mall. Roxanne asked hesitatingly, "Is there anything you need to buy?" In her opinion, shopping in a mall together like that was basically something only a family would do. She was worried that outsiders might misunderstand, especially when they were bringing 3 children along. Lucian glanced at Estella, who was sitting next to Roxanne, and said, "It's been a while since I've bought Essie new clothes. I don't know what girls like to wear, and since we have time today, I'm hoping you'll be able to help Ms. Jarvis." When Estella heard that, she promptly nodded as she looked at Roxanne expectantly. Her grandmother had always been the one buying clothes for her. She wanted to wear the clothes that Roxanne picked out for her. Roxanne's heart softened when she saw the pitiful look in the girl's eyes, and so she nodded in agreement. With that, all of them left the restaurant and went straight to the mall next door. Meanwhile, Frida, who only had a few mouthfuls of her food, stood up with the intention of following them when she saw them leave. "Frida, there's still so much food left," Aso called out to her in distress as he looked at the table full of food. Annoyance flashed past Frida's eyes. She turned around and reproached, "They're gone. If you want to eat, we can come back here next time." Aso's heart ached for the wasted food, but he still went along with his goddess and followed her. The two followed them from a distance. When Frida saw them entering the children's clothing section in the mall, she unwillingly stopped in her tracks, then pulled Aso to the nearby women's clothing section, knowing that they would stand out too much and easily get caught. "Hello, Mississippi. What type of clothes do you like?" An employee promptly arrived in front of them. Frida was bent on keeping an eye on Roxanne and the others. So when she heard that, she swept her gaze past the clothes, picked a few expensive ones, told the employee her size, and asked the employee to bag them up. At the side, Aso felt immense pain when he saw her splurge like that. However, he liked her pretty face very much, and he wanted to climb the social ladder through her, so he had no choice but to endure the pain and pay for her clothes. Roxanne did not really buy any new clothes for the children after returning to the country. The clothes that they had were basically bought by Madeline. Lucian was even less experienced in buying clothes for children. Looking at the various stores in the children's clothing section and feeling somewhat overwhelmed, he simply let the children choose what they wanted. "And Miss Jarvis?" Estella suddenly tugged on Roxanne's sleeve. Perplexed, Roxanne trailed the girl's line of sight and saw a store with simple decorations. Many of the clothes inside the store were sets of adult and children's clothing. Clearly, the store was selling matching outfits. Because they were in a high-end mall, a lot of the matching outfits inside were formal clothing. It was the first time Estella had seen similar-looking clothing for adults and children. She was very excited about the prospect of wearing matching dresses with Roxanne. Roxanne, however, was a little hesitant. She could more or less guess what the girl was thinking. However, she was already making a big concession to help pick the girl's clothes. If she were to wear matching outfits with the girl, people would undoubtedly misunderstand their relationship. "You're a good girl, Essie. How about we look at other stores?" She leaned over and tried to divert Estella's attention. However, Estella refused to move her gaze away from that store. Her watery eyes were filled with hope. It was also the first time Archie and Benny had seen that type of clothing. They glanced at Lucian with slight anticipation, but they didn't have the courage to say it. Seeing that the children refused to move, Roxanne looked at Lucian helplessly to seek his help. Their eyes met for a short moment before he averted his gaze. Clearly, he wanted her to take care of the mess. Roxanne's head was starting to hurt. Before she could say anything, Estella had already pulled her sleeve and led her to the shop. With no other choice, Roxanne followed the girl inside. "I hope she doesn't make any outrageous requests." "Welcome." The employee had been watching them for a long time. Her eyes were filled with excitement when she saw them finally entering the shop. They were the most good-looking family she had met ever since she started working there. If I can get their approval to take a photo of them together later and hang that picture at the entrance of the shop, our sales will undoubtedly soar. At the thought of this, the employee became more and more welcoming toward them. You kids are so adorable. What type of clothes do you like? I can help you all try them out, the employee offered as she smiled at the children. The children were dazzled by the many choices available, as it was their first time picking out clothing for themselves. Roxanne had wanted to pick the clothes for the children. However, when she thought about how the shop only sold matching outfits, her mind was abuzz with chaos and she lost the mood to shop. She could only leave the children to look around on their own. Suddenly, Estella tugged her sleeve again. Upon returning to her senses, Roxanne followed Estella's line of sight, her nerves stretched taut. She saw two dresses in front of them. One was a simple fishtail dress, its shoulder straps and hem of the skirt decorated with small diamonds. It looked simple and had an unobtrusive design. The other was a pure white princess dress that came in a smaller size. The hem of the skirt was embellished with pearls, making it look much more charming and adorable. While there were differences between the two dresses, their overall style was similar enough that people would know that those two belonged to a matching set at a glance. Estella looked at the dresses, then at Roxanne with anticipation written all over her face.
Roxanne furrowed her eyebrows slightly. She was about to explain to Estella that matching outfits were meant to be worn with her daddy and mommy when the employee beat her to it. "You have such a good eye, little girl. This set of matching dresses really fits you and your mommy." Roxanne was stunned. She glanced at Estella before shifting her gaze to the employee, wanting to deny that statement. To her surprise, before she could speak, the girl was already hugging her arm. The latter even called out sweetly, "Je mommy." For a moment, Roxanne didn't know how to respond. Estella, on the other hand, was filled with anticipation. "Daddy said he'll make Miss Jarvis my mommy. It should be fine if I call her mommy right now." Roxanne was stunned for a long time. When she recollected herself, she turned to look at Lucian and wondered how he would react. Lucian loves Essie very much, so I bet her real mommy probably holds a very important spot in his heart. He'll probably correct Essie's mistake soon. Lucian furrowed his brows when his eyes met hers. After staying silent for a few seconds, he approached Estella expressionlessly and looked down at her from above. Watch what you say, Essie." Estella didn't expect her attempt at helping her father chase after Roxanne would cause her to be reprimanded. "No. I want Miss Jarvis to be my mommy." Estella, her eyes red, mumbled aggrievedly upon hearing his stern tone and gave him an accusing look. "You said." Seeing that he was going to be sold out by his own daughter again, Lucian said in a deeper voice, "Don't trouble Miss Jarvis, Estella. If you like the dress, I can buy it for you." The employee standing at the side didn't expect their relationship to be that complicated. "Sir, our clothes are sold in sets." Lucian glanced at Roxanne and uttered, "You then bag these two dresses." Of course, Estella knew what her father meant. He was going to buy both dresses, but she would only wear the princess dress. Realizing that, she became even more aggrieved and angry. "No. I don't want it anymore." She wanted to wear the matching dress with Roxanne. Lucian frowned as he stared at Estella, who was throwing a tantrum. At that moment, the atmosphere between the father and daughter became very tense. Roxanne's heart ached as she took in Estella's reddened eyes and the way Lucian educated the child. In order to comfort the girl, she leaned down, looked into her eyes, and asked, "You want me to wear the matching dresses with you, right, Essie?" Estella sniffled and nodded vigorously. Roxanne suppressed the strange emotion in her heart and smiled. "Okay. Let's go and try out the dresses." With that, she got up and grabbed the dresses from the employee's hands. Estella's eyes slowly lit up when she heard that. After shooting her father a furious look, she turned away and entered the fitting room while holding Roxanne's hand. After some time, they changed their clothes and came out of the fitting room. Roxanne brought Estella to a mirror. The latter smiled when she looked at the two of them in the mirror.
Archie and Benny watched silently and enviously from behind. They also wanted to wear matching outfits with their parents. However, they weren't as bold as their younger sister. Knowing that Lucian was their father, they tended to act more reserved in front of him. Roxanne looked at the happy smile on Estella's face, and her concern reduced greatly. She patted the girl's head and said, "The dress really suits you, Essie. Let's take it off now so the employee can bag them." Estella shook her head without hesitation and grabbed Roxanne's hand tightly. She did not want to take off the dress that quickly when it was rare for her to wear the same clothes as Roxanne. Roxanne could guess what the girl was thinking. "Well, since we're already wearing these matching outfits, I don't think there is any difference if we wear them for a little longer." She went along with Estella's idea and asked the employee to bag the clothes they were originally wearing. After following the employee to the cash register, she was about to pay for the dresses with her phone when Lucian pulled out his card and gave it to the employee. Roxanne was slightly stunned as she thought the action seemed a little too intimate. With a frown she said, "I can pay for it." Lucian looked at her, then at Estella and said, "You didn't need to buy any clothes, Miss Jarvis. You're only doing so now because of Essie. So I should be the one to pay for it." When the employee at the side sensed the ambiguous atmosphere between the two and saw Lucian's black card, she chimed in, "There's no need for you to be so courteous with this gentleman, Mississippi. After all, a man should pay for a woman." Then she grabbed the card in Lucian's hand. Roxanne frowned and kept her phone. She knew the employee had misunderstood their relationship. Before they left, the employee asked carefully, "May I take a photo of you with the girl?" Roxanne refused politely, knowing what the employee was trying to do, and left with the children. If she agreed, her picture with Estella would no doubt be put up in the shop. By then, if anyone saw it or word got out, it might cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Frida watched as they exited the shop, and immediately she noticed Roxanne and Estella had changed into new outfits. Why do their dresses look as though they were made by the same person? It wasn't until she stared at the dresses for a while that she realized they were matching outfits. That batch. Not only did she not learn her lesson last time, but she's being more and more ridiculous. Even though she knows Lucian has a fiancé and that Essie will have a new mother in the future, she still has the gall to wear a matching outfit with her. Not only that, both of them look pretty close to each other from the back. If I allow them to continue like this, won't Roxanne end up replacing Aubrey? At that thought, Frida promptly pulled out her phone and took a photo of Roxanne and Estella before sending the picture to Aubrey. After that, she continued to follow them with a scowl. The sky's turning dark. Let's see where they're going. Frida. Aso was holding bags of clothing when he turned around and noticed Frida was already leaving the shop. He quickly went after her. "How much longer do we need to follow them? I've already made dinner arrangements." Frida pursed her lips, looking annoyed. However, when she turned to face him, her expression changed. She held his arm petulantly and asked, "Is my friend more important or is dinner more important?" Giddy with joy that his goddess had taken the initiative to show him affection, Aso nodded. "Your friend, of course."
Frida and Aso followed Roxanne and the others for a while. Watching as they entered the concert venue, Frida was so livid that she snapped a few pictures before sending them all to Aubrey. Aubrey was already fuming when she saw the previous 2 photos that her friend had sent. When she received a few more photos of Lucian and Roxanne entering a very famous auditorium in the city with 3 children, her head buzzed as though it was about to explode. She knew there would be a concert at the auditorium that day because she had asked people to help her procure 2 tickets to that concert. The tickets were meant for her and Lucian. However, Lucian had rejected her invitation without giving her a reason. Aubrey could only convince herself that he must be busy with work, and so she had given those 2 tickets to her best friend. However, little did she expect that the man had rejected her because he wanted to attend the concert with Roxanne. Aubrey was about to lose her mind as she stared at the pictures when Frida called. She answered her phone with a scowl, only to hear the displeasure in Frida's voice. Did you see the pictures I sent you, Aubrey?" "Where did you see them?" Aubrey asked through gritted teeth. Frida gave her a brief summary of what she had seen in the afternoon. When she finished, she said angrily, "Roxanne's going way overboard. She's basically ignoring you. Mrs. Farwell has warned her before, but instead of repenting, she even got closer to Lucian and Essie." Upon learning that they even had lunch together, Aubrey flew off the handle. That batch. I've spent much effort to convince Mrs. Farwell to warn Roxanne, yet Roxanne doesn't seem to know any better. You must be careful, Aubrey." Worried that nothing would come out of her effort, Frida added, Roxanne is Lucian's ex-wife and Essie's biological mother. Now that Essie's so attached to Roxanne, perhaps. She deliberately trailed off to let Aubrey realize what she was getting at, and Aubrey did get her message. Perhaps Roxanne and Essie already know their relationship with each other. And I know Lucian has been looking into the accident. If he finds out about the truth, then I'll no doubt lose him. At the thought of that possibility, Aubrey panicked and her voice quavered. Impossible. Frida was very eager for her friend to teach Roxanne a lesson, so she continued to pour fuel into the fire. I hope that's not the case too. However, seeing how intimate they are right now, it's not impossible for Lucian to fall in love with her again, especially when she's quite a crafty woman. I'm reminding you of this right now because I want you to prepare in advance. After all, you're the most suited for Lucian in my mind. Who does Roxanne think she is? Aubrey was so angry that her hands were shaking. Thanks for the reminder. I got it. It wasn't until Frida said a few more things that she hung up the phone in satisfaction. Even though Aubrey's phone screen had turned black, she felt as though she could still see those pictures there. Roxanne, you batch. Just you wait. Reflected on the black screen was her contorted face. The concert hadn't started when Lucian and Roxanne brought the children inside. Theirs were VIP seats, and it was a spot with a small, round, exquisite table. There was only one chair on both sides of the table. Roxanne asked a server to bring 3 additional chairs for the children to sit between her and Lucian. That way, it would be easier for them to take care of the children's needs at all times. Looking at the seat arrangement, Estella glanced at her father and an idea popped into her mind. She turned around and carefully tugged Roxanne's arm. Roxanne looked at her, confused. I can't see the stage clearly, Miss Jarvis. Estella looked at Roxanne pitifully. Upon hearing that, Roxanne knitted her brows and glanced at everyone's seats. She had put Estella there because it would be easier to take care of her, but she had failed to notice how difficult it would be for the girl to see the stage. Without hesitation, she stood up and switched places with Estella. Estella secretly grinned when she saw her father and Roxanne getting closer. Noticing their sister's intention, Archie and Benny exchanged a glance before looking at their mother in unison. Mommy, we want to sit with Essie. The boys tugged the hem of Roxanne's dress. Roxanne was about to agree when she abruptly realized if she did that, she would be sitting very close to Lucian. She hesitated. However, the boys were looking at her with such pitiful looks that they looked as though they were about to cry. Roxanne glanced at Estella, who was sitting next to her, and saw her staring at the boys with the same look of anticipation. Clearly, they really wanted to sit with each other. Meanwhile, Lucian seemed completely oblivious to what was going on. He was utterly focused on the stage, waiting for the performance to start. Roxanne hesitated for a long while before she eventually decided to switch places with the boys and let them sit next to Estella. You 3 must keep quiet when the performance starts later, okay? And don't run around, as she reminded the children worriedly. While she knew they were usually pretty obedient, she was worried that they would get too excited, forget where they were, and disturb other people. It was a real concern for her, since they had switched places with her and were sitting behind her and Lucian at the moment. The children nodded seriously. Only then did Roxanne relax slightly and sit next to Lucian. The moment she sat down, Lucian, who had been focused on the stage, abruptly turned to look at her. Roxanne was caught off guard and felt guilty for some reasons. She hastily explained, the children couldn't get a better look at the stage, so, even though the children were the ones who had asked to switch places with her, she was worried he would misunderstand something since he didn't seem to know what was going on. Thankfully, after listening to her explanation, Lucian only glanced at the children behind her with a frown. Estella stuck her tongue out at him to indicate that it was all her plan. Lucian raised an eyebrow imperceptibly when he saw that. Then he averted his gaze from his daughter and looked at the woman in front of him. I suppose it was difficult for them to see clearly due to their short stature. I wasn't being considerate enough. Hearing that, Roxanne inwardly sighed with relief and gave him a small smile. The three children, sitting behind and looking at the intimate distance between the adults, exchanged glances and grinned from ear to ear. Not long after, the concert officially began. The curtains were slowly pulled open, and soothing music could be heard. The theme of the concert was Western Symphony. There were a variety of instruments on the stage. All musicians, smiling at the conductor, were dressed in suits and had their hair combed neatly. It was visually pleasing. Once the curtains were completely drawn, the conductor raised and dropped his hand, and the performance started gently. Roxanne looked at the stage intently, her attention captured by the harmonious music. Although Lucian was staring at the stage, his attention was on the woman next to him. Watching as she listened to the music attentively, Lucian creased his brows, a touch of helplessness crossing his heart. According to Jonathan, watching a concert was the best time to do something that would bring them closer to each other. However, Roxanne was so absorbed in the performance that he couldn't just interrupt her abruptly. Just as he was wondering what to do, someone tugged his suit from behind. Lucian turned back to look at the children. I want to drink some water, Mr. Farwell," Benny whispered next to his ear. Lucian nodded slightly and poured the boy a cup of water with the jug on the table. Estella also requested Roxanne to do the same. As most of Roxanne's attention was still on the stage, she grabbed the jug without thinking upon hearing Estella's request. To her surprise, a large hand suddenly covered hers before she could grab the jug. Roxanne could obviously feel a pause in the movement of that hand. However, that hand didn't move away even after a while. There were only 5 people at the table, so it wasn't hard to guess who that hand belonged to. Roxanne withdrew her gaze from the stage, then turned to look at Lucian warily. When he met her eyes, Lucian regarded her apologetically before letting go of his hand. He, too, was surprised when he suddenly touched her hand. However, it didn't take long for him to realize the children were creating yet another opportunity for him. Lucian found it amusing when he thought about the effort the children were putting in for him to get closer to Roxanne. Thus, in order not to let their hard work go to waste, he didn't let go of her hand for a long while. The children's eyes sparkled with joy when the adults touched each other. However, they were disappointed when those hands moved away so quickly afterward. Pursing their lips, they stared at Roxanne's back bitterly. Estella had long since known that her father wanted to pursue Roxanne, while Archie and Benny had figured that out themselves. Knowing that their father wanted to pursue their mother again, they, too, tried to help. Yet, the one thing they didn't expect was how difficult it was for their father to pursue their mother. Panic struck the children when they saw their mother looking at their father warily. Roxanne had no idea that the children were all on Lucian's side. She only found their accidental contact earlier a little odd. In fact, she even suspected that Lucian had done it on purpose. However, she quickly abandoned that thought because, based on what she knew about his personality, he wouldn't do something as awkward as that to chase after her. She concluded in her mind that it was simply an accident. Suppressing the strange feeling in her heart, She poured Estella a cup of water and handed it to her.
When she turned back, Roxanne saw Lucian pouring 2 cups of water and putting one each in front of Archie and Benny. She was puzzled. Is he doing that because they asked for it, or is it because he wants to relieve the awkwardness from earlier? Just as her mind was still in a chaotic mess, a cup of water suddenly appeared in front of her. Roxanne came back to her senses and glanced at the person next to her. Lucian smiled at her mysteriously, then retracted his hand from the cup and turned his attention back to the stage. After staring at the cup with mixed emotions for a long while, Roxanne thanked him in a small voice. She felt apologetic because she believed she had misunderstood him earlier. In order to show him that she didn't hold a grudge, she took a sip of water from the cup he had given her. The children's lips quirked up when they saw how the adults interacted. They thought Roxanne had lowered her guard. When the concert ended, Lucian and Roxanne left the auditorium with the children. The darkness of night had descended upon the world when they stepped out of the building. Lights of various colors lit up around them, and the square was bustling with people. It was a lively sight. Mommy." Benny pulled his mother's hand. Roxanne lowered her head and followed the direction he was pointing at with her eyes. There was a musical fountain not too far from them in the square. It was spraying water to the music, and plenty of children and adults were playing in the water. Roxanne rarely took the children out at night, so it was their first time seeing that kind of fountain, and they were excited to play with it. She had planned to return home right after the concert ended because she didn't want to interact with Lucian too much. But after seeing how excited the children were, she couldn't bear to just leave. Let's play over there." Benny had already turned his body in the direction of the fountain as he looked at Roxanne. Roxanne hesitated for a few seconds before agreeing. Turning to Lucian, she said, "I'll bring the boys over there and let them play for a while. You can bring Essie back first, Mr. Farwell. I'll just call for a taxi later." She had thought Estella disliked crowded places and would obediently follow Lucian back. To her surprise, the moment she finished her sentence, the girl pulled Lucian's sleeve. "Daddy, I want to play too." Roxanne was slightly shocked to see Estella actively wanting to play at a place with many people. Lucian simply patted the girl's head and agreed. Then he met Roxanne's eyes and said, "It's rare for Essie to tell me directly where she wants to go and play, so I'm afraid I can't do what you want, Ms. Jarvis." With that, he brought Estella and headed toward the fountain. Roxanne stared at their backs in a daze. Estella seemed exceptionally happy. She was hopping in her princess dress as Lucian held her hand. When they were halfway to the fountain, Estella lifted her head and said something to Lucian. Roxanne saw Lucian nodding at the girl, then the girl let go of his hand and sprinted toward her. "Let's go together, Ms. Jarvis." Before Roxanne could react, Estella grabbed her by the hand and dragged her toward the fountain. Archie and Benny urged her from behind, "Let's go, Mommy." As they spoke, they had already run past her and arrived at the fountain. Then they started playing with each other. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.